Well, good morning. I'm going to speak quickly. I have a lot of things I want to share with you today. I have a lot of things on my heart actually to say. I had the privilege of doing a little time travel. This is the fourth time I've spoken at Geoweb, and I looked at my slides from the last 3 years and looked to see what I had said. And I realized I had made a mistake in that almost everything I said came true. So I wasn't aggressive enough in my predictions, and also wasn't strong enough in sharing how strongly I believed those things. I said like they were likely and possible. I didn't say, there's no way in blank that won't happen. I wasn't powerful enough. So I'm going to be a little bit stronger today. So clearly I want to share with you this odd notion that somehow the old Geoweb needs to change for the new world, which is an odd thing since we're still trying to build the Geoweb. But nonetheless, that's the reality that I see. And I want to share about what that world is that I have a chance to see that's so unexpectedly different, and it's in a great way, though. And actually what the mayor just said was a perfect example of what I'm talking about. You have an elected official who's excited about using his data, wants to use things like safe software to get things in different formats, wants citizens to see the value. Everything that he said is what we always dreamed that elected officials would even know what the vocabulary was to say those things, right? So it's so exciting to see that happen, and that's a side effect of what I'm talking about. So here's what we're going to talk about today. Basically, perspectives on a few topics. First, on the actual role of information. I think you know that I believe strongly that Thomas Jefferson was right when he said that information itself is the strongest weapon that free people have against tyranny, the strongest advocate they have for improvement, just because basically when the facts are out there, reasonable people can make good decisions. That's what it comes down to. It's a belief in people that if they have enough information, they can do the right thing, or at least a better thing, and a certainty from experience that if they have partial information, they'll do the wrong thing. Right? That's where lynch mobs come from. That's where gang things. Having a subset of information is almost worse than having no information at all. So information is really good, and it just so happens that I work for a company where we actually take that as almost like a missionary cause. At Google, we think that our mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And I say that not too casually. So, for example, if you think about what is all the world's information? Well, like all the world's sheet music, all the world's, how do you make it accessible? Maybe like in Braille. Well, how do you make sheet music accessible in Braille? If you think about that. So I think about things like that all the time. So let's take a look at that. So imagine the kinds of devices that you might need to have the information presented to you on a Kindle, on a set-top box, on a cell phone, on a piece of paper. There's a lot of things you might want to see it on a billboard, whatever. You also might want to think about the style of information that you want to see. It might have been a book. You might have had, like I did, eye surgery, and you want to hear the book on audio tape. Not that you can't read, but maybe it's better if you have it verbally for a little while. You might want to hear it, if it's a song, you could read Bob Dylan's lyrics, or you might have somebody sing Bob Dylan's lyrics. You might want to search for it and then hear the music. So that's an interesting mode. And there's another notion of like the language in which you hear it. As it turns out, not everybody speaks English. And amazingly, many people do, which is actually pretty shocking, actually, if you think about how unreasonable it is that one language could have such a draconian influence over innocent other language groups. But still, it's a minority of humans, even though it's a preponderant language, say. So then, like in Canada, maybe like French and English are both useful in signs, and in parts of Africa, neither is very useful on signs. So you have to communicate to people in maybe other languages, through gestures, sign language. And then this other fourth dimension of taxonomy are just kinds of information you might want to see. So if you just look at all of that and think, well, how would you organize all of that? And what would it even mean to organize that? What is an organized instant message? And what, so to speak, what is an organized Twitter feed? What is an organized, sound library? So those are the kinds of things we think about, is this diversity of information. And the other thing that makes me really feel good is there are people who have terrible apprehension about information. I don't actually like that, but it helps me know that there's value there. So recently, a few months ago, there was an anniversary of some events, and the day before that, YouTube got turned off. And we don't know why, because it's just a video sharing site. And then this Chinese guy came on national television and said, China is not afraid of the internet. In fact, we like it. We just need to make sure that only good things are on there. Right? So, and then some people on the web did this research of all the 27 previous times that had been turned off. They found out, well, this time it was about Tiananmen Square, and that time it was about somebody's birthday, and that time it was about something at Dalai Lama. So they had this whole litany of all the times they'd been turned off, and they all corresponded one-to-one with sort of dissident news. And so the effect of it is really clear. You have a country that's the highest population in the world, has as many nuclear bombs as anybody else, that has a bigger army than anybody else, that's actually terrified of YouTube. So that makes me feel okay, because it tells me that Jefferson was right. It is the greatest strength in a democracy, but it's not the greatest strength in every kind of government. But that's okay. Everybody can't love you when you do the right thing, because they don't agree with what the right thing is. The next thing I would share with you, just to real quickly remind you, is that information is only useful when it can be understood. Having all the information, GIS information, airline schedules, whatever, is of no use if it's not understandable. So, for example, the entire telephone book with the names in transliterated into Japanese would not be useful if you don't read Japanese, right? If it was most of the phone numbers, not all of them, it would be pretty frustrating. If it was all the phone numbers but in a random order, it would be maddening, okay? If it was half the numbers but in a random order in Chinese, right, it would be like something you could start fires with, right? But you couldn't find a phone number with it, right? It would be totally useless. And so it's very important to understand it. It's not lots of data in one place isn't valuable, whatever kind of data it is. Lots of data that you can actually read and interpret is valuable. Like, for example, lots of shapefiles on a disk aren't valuable. Lots of shapefiles with descriptions is valuable, right? So it's not just the data. It's which one of those is the true file. It's the what and why and when and the provenance actually makes the data have its great value. Next thing is that progress means simplifying. By the way, if you want to know what I'm saying, only things that have to pay attention to are things that are in bold. You can ignore everything else, just bold things. Simplifying is the real act of genius. Making things complex by adding more stuff is the act of sort of commonplace, right? So if you just stop and think about, well, how many buttons on your dashboard do you turn most times you drive? Then clearly, if it's like 1 out of 50, then it's a poorly designed dashboard. So just think about that. That applies to all of life. Another thing is that basically, if you want to be an innovator, you want to build something new, you want to transform things, you want to change things, you want to do something different, you got to question everything. So if you're going to be the really insightful dashboard designer, you have to say, well, do we need a steering wheel? Do we need a brake? How about the radio knob? You can't take any of those things as givens, because maybe you should sit in the middle of the car, maybe you should sit in the back seat, maybe you should sit on the roof. You have to start with everything being a flexible variable to come back to what the real truth is. Otherwise, the acceptance of preconditions limits the solution space, and you're stuck with the legacy of the past, which could be wise legacy, but you'll figure that out if you just start from scratch. And the last statement is my favorite statement, is the founder of Honda Motor Company said that basically success comes as a result of a pioneer spirit. I love that, a pioneer spirit. I imagine like a Canadian Mountie and a dog, and king, and just some sort of great overcoming attitude where you might have failure, but that doesn't stop you. It's just temporary, right? You have setbacks. They're not stumbling blocks. And failure, introspection, and courage. I'll talk about that later. Nothing's more important. The second thing I want to talk about, probably the most important thing for today, GIS community is famous for great accuracy, good record retention in terms of provenance, fabulous equipment. If you think about things that are made in Switzerland and Germany to measure angles and distances, our maps are very good, so to speak. Our embrace of change as an industry, our speed of adaptation is actually pretty dinosaur-like. And not in this room. I mean, these are the evolving subgroup of the big group of dinosaurs. But from an industry standpoint, it's not a rapid change industry. And that's actually the biggest thing I want to talk about today. That is the collision course for disaster.